Good afternoon, everybody. It was haircut time in my house on Saturday, so we took care of the haircut, started getting some other things done. Speed up to Monday, spend most of Monday getting this ready and doing other things for the college. Wake up this morning, whole world flipped upside down, whole damn things changed, and we'll see what happens from here. Right now, we're hopeful. We're going to stay hopeful in the face of adversity. I can't flip out over every little thing. I could. I'm not going to. Uh, the good news is this is an interesting lecture to me. The bad news is I'm still not with you to give it. The good news is that I will be back with you next week, come hell or high water. And then we're hoping that after that, I'll be back with you more consistently going forward. But the hope is that on Monday morning, we'll see all of our happy faces together. And it'll be good to it'd be good to see you guys. It'd be good to see you guys. So let's get on with it. Organizational behavior, chapter 4. Your learning objectives for this class, individual behavior and development. This is about the individual itself and businesses inside of that individual structure. We're going to talk a little bit about the bureaucratic structure, um, Miles' Law, what that is, how it operates, trust in bureaucracies or in organizations, and expertise. I'm going to interchange the words organization and bureaucratic throughout this text. That's just kind of my government thing coming out. I apologize. I'm sure Dr. Parsons and I could have an argument all day about these things, but the government side is coming out today, so just roll with it. So let's start with organizational behavior and the individual. Now, the chapter as a whole focuses on the ability of an individual to work inside of a larger organization. Now, when we talk about goals, team management in general, you're looking for something called participatory management. This is the key to this type of leadership style. This is a leadership style, by the way. And the key to the theory is workers should have a theory that you're working with, not that the organization is working over you. So it's an inclusive mindset. They really want you to feel like you're working as part of the bigger picture. That the things that you do are part of the bigger push of the organization, and that you're not being told what to do for mindless reasons. You're working for somebody else's money. You know, I make a dime, the boss makes a dollar, and or that's why I poop on company time. That it's supposed to rhyme, but that's what this is that you should have the opportunity to work with an organization, not have the organization work over you. Now, the very first example in the chapter talks about incentive-based working. Incentives are fine, but incentives are tricky. When you offer incentives like money, you can often run into problems where um, incentivize things like, for example, No Child Left Behind. One of the big pushes against No Child Left Behind, and the reason that it changed later on during the Obama administration from the Bush administration, was that it conditioned federal money to schools that met certain benchmarks in testing. So what does that mean exactly? Well, it means that you have to actually meet this minimum benchmark of testing, or you're not going to get funding. Now, when these things happen, do you think that, for example, the school system did fair testing, for example? Well, no, they didn't. They would push kids through that weren't ready. This is how you get 11th and 12th graders that can't read, that can't speak English. Not that speaking English is a prerequisite. That's okay. Sorry, I'm getting text again on my iPad. Not that speaking English is necessarily a prerequisite, but it's timely to today's problems. We'll talk about that when I get back specifically. But the incentivization of performance is a tricky thing, and it's a balancing act where you want to make sure that the incentive is good enough to get the result that you want, but you got to monitor that to make sure that the incentive does not become the only reason that the performance gets done or the incentive is met uh, at the cost of the effectiveness of the program. That's what I'm trying to say. So there is some incentive also for organizations to push for better relations with employees. And this is mainly because without employees, the organization couldn't exist at all. It's the idea of efficiency, really, is that the organization can either take care of its people, or if they don't, there is the other side of that coin, which is if people aren't taken care of, they're not going to be as efficient, and that's a problem. And not deliver the services they're trying to deliver. So two types of organization, again, public, private. For this conversation, we need to change to meet the needs and demands of private or public versus private sectors. So what I mean by this is, again, when we talk about public sector jobs, the goals and functions of a public sector job are different than that of a private sector job. It's just different. The objectives are different. The methods are different. The resources are different. It's just different. So to have these conversations, you've got to be able to interchange public and private in the way the regulations work and the way that any number of things work inside of the process of actual organization when you talk about public versus private. So make sure that you can interchange those two things in your mind. So again, reiterating, what may be expected of a public sector company may not be as relevant for a private company. For example, a public company, say Medicaid or Medicare, their goal is to give you the most effective brand of healthcare that they can give you, but they also have to do it in a fair and honest way. A public or a private insurance company can, for example, if you build your house in a floodplain, they don't have to offer you flood insurance because you built in a high-risk area. They don't have to offer you the type of insurance that you're most likely to face in that area. But the government, on the other hand, can mandate that you have insurance, but not what type. So it gets sticky, very, very sticky. Insurance companies can mandate, for example, that you stop smoking as part of their bottom line. They can tell you that unless you stop smoking, it's going to be $150 a month that you pay to us to stop smoking or to continue smoking. That's the price that you'll pay to continue smoking. Now, we can help you and put you in programs to help you quit, but you must stop consuming tobacco in this manner, or else you'll continue to pay. This is just one example, and it's an imperfect example of the way that public versus private can operate against each other. Private sector as well, again, profit is their bottom line. So whereas the public sector has the general good at mind, the private sector doesn't necessarily have to. Should, but doesn't necessarily have to. Supreme Court. So the balancing act, again, the common theme for these first couple slides, the biggest obstacle to any organization is the balancing act that they must perform between meeting goals and overall compliance. I'm just getting bombarded with emails right now, I'm sorry. So an employee is held to a standard within the organization, but there's always a line where the expectations demanded of the employee can cut into overall productivity and be detrimental to the organization. So, what does this mean exactly? You can be held, I hate this word, but widgets. You can be held to making X amount of widgets per day, widgets per hour, per month, etc. There's an expectation that is demanded by the company that you make the maximum amount of time that you should spend on each thing should be this, therefore you should get an average of this. Now, the problem is on the other side, the employee can only do so much physically possible. So like I, as a disabled person, have certain protections and certain regulations that are put in place to protect me from potentially hurting myself on the job and overworking myself for an employer that doesn't, that, not that they don't care, but they don't care. You know what I mean? Um, they don't care as long as you meet your production goals. There's a line to those things, and a line where productivity can outpace the human side of the company. I look at Amazon right now and the allegations against Amazon, where they're using the bathroom and Gatorade bottles, and the one where they opened the can or the case of bear mace and sent a couple people to the hospital, or where carbon dioxide was settled to the floor at that one place and killed those people. Is just those types of things happen in organizations, and the question is there a reform that can be put into place, because it has to come from some, because, and this is the political side of it, the corporation is going to have lobbyists in place that when those things happen, when the reform comes down, they're going to try to make sure that the reform does not affect overall productivity. Okay? And so the reform may not actually do what it was intended to do, because the corporation is able to throw enough money at it that the politician can't do what they need to do on the government side in order to curb the problem from existing. So there is a balancing act that has to take place. And for our purposes for this class, we're going to act like we're administrators, and we have to strike that balance. And in everything that we do and everything that we write and we try to analyze, we're trying to see, is that balance being met. So training capacity. Now there is something to be said for being trained and experienced. Like, experience is a good thing to have. Experience is a good thing to have inside of your organization. The problem becomes when that experience becomes the only type of thinking that you do. So the danger of becoming entrenched. And when I say entrenched, I mean locked into, if X happens, then Y. If we see this, then this has got to happen. Or if we're never going to do this because this. Now, there are circumstances where just because you see this new thing might happen. And when this new thing happens, you can't throw old head thinking at it. You can't keep throwing old solutions at new problems. Put it that way. This can be taken on the social level as well, like the military, for example. We got a Secretary of Defense that was just put into office that believes with his whole chest that women do not belong in the military. Not in combat zones, not in combat situations. I think we could all reasonably agree that there are some places that women probably maybe shouldn't be in terms of combat. Now, I don't even know that that's necessarily true, but I'm willing to concede a little bit of ground there. But any further than that, like you're saying that women don't belong in the military at all because that decreases their lethality and all these other things. Well, that just doesn't match to the society that we live in now. It doesn't match to that type of pervasive sexism. Is just something that is ground into a certain section of our society, and it doesn't affect just the military. It affects all sorts of places, like our politics, like in Congress, like at the upper levels of government or inside of institutions. That women are still that women are hysterical, that they can't control their emotions, that they can't do this, they can't do that. There are things that women just can't do that men can do, supposedly. It's a ridiculous wall of thinking that is easy to become entrenched with when it's all that you hear all the time, but it's just not true. Same thing for, say, merit-based hiring and the end of the DEI initiatives. I know that we talked about DEI before, but let's talk about it again because it's important. Ending DEI is not doing what you think it does, and enforcing merit-based hiring is like if you put down the definition of merit-based hiring, it is essentially putting the people that have the right qualifications into jobs that are right for them. That sounds great when that's the only definition you're dealing with. The problem becomes when you put it into practice. Myself, Dr. Parsons, Dr. Cole, I'm sure Dr. Claiborne, Ms. Pena, Juliet, any one of us could show you an instance where merit-based hiring is not only ignored, where like the person that's being put into office is either a preferred political choice or it's a who you know choice or it's an act of loyalty in the case of, like, let's just go back to SecDef. Pete Hegseth, I don't know how he got on the list for Secretary of Defense. I don't understand it. I don't know how Pam Bondi is the Attorney General. I don't know how Kash Patel ends up being the director of the FBI. These people don't have any type of criteria that makes them qualified for those offices, but they got hired anyway. That's not merit-based hiring. It's not DEI either. It's well, to me it's incompetence, but that's me taking off a professor hat for a second and just saying what I really think. I think it's stupid and it's incompetent. But putting my professor hat back on, it's not. They don't meet the basic definition of what they're asking for, which is merit-based. So continuing on, the new high-tech age is a good example of this problem. For example, I, as a professor, when I teach you guys, I depend on things like PowerPoint. I depend on my technology working in the room the way that it is supposed to do my job. Now enter this job where I come into a prison and most of my technology is stripped from me. Suddenly I don't know what to do. I was already probably pretty sketchy as a teacher anyway, but I had to go back to a time even before I became a teacher, to a time even before I was a student, like in elementary school before all the technology really took place. I don't remember a time that I didn't have a substantial amount of technology on my side. So, and the book also had a good example. I don't have the page open right now. I wish I did. If you want to stop and look at the its training capacity, and its the example that they have listed there was good. I read it last night, and I can't remember what it is now. I made a note somewhere, but I can't see it. Right. Looking at more issues of trained inefficiency, or of a breakdown in the way that the organization can work. Hierarchical ranking, and the way the innovation and ideas flow along the chain of command in organizations. Let's just start by saying, again, we know what trained. Uh, we just talked about this. I can't go back. We just talked about trained incapacity and how old thinking can lead to frozen solutions. Well, the same thing can happen here in an organization when, for example, if I was to come to Dr. Parsons and have a legitimate issue in my classroom, and instead of, like, Dr. Parsons has been fantastic with allowing me to make mistakes and sternly but fairly correcting me and allowing me to learn the way that I need to learn to become a better teacher. She's done a fantastic job, and I'm not blowing her up because she's in the classroom and listening to this. I mean this sincerely. She has been a great boss in that regard, and not just, it's not been punitive every time. She understands that I have deficits, and instead of criticizing those deficits, she's helping me fix them. And that's a across the board great way to look at leadership. It's not like it's not always stick. Sometimes it's carrot too. And by allowing me to learn for myself, she's also setting me up on a path that in the future I'm not going to make those same mistakes. Now I'll make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. Like whatever's coming down the pipe is probably a doozy, and I will make more mistakes, but I won't make the same mistakes. They'll be new and fun and interesting. So she allows for somebody like me who's relatively new to teaching and relatively new to um, this particular discipline and to this type of teaching as well. I should say, like I've never had a full time, like this is your job now teaching job. This is a whole different ball game to me. She's allowing me to learn and to become better with her guidance, allowing me with the flexibility to do those things. And she's taking my input as well. She knows that I'm in the classroom generally more than she is. I've got a more direct link to the facility and to uh, the students than she sometimes does. And she depends on me to be able to look at you guys and make a call or make decisions about, hey, we should try this or try this. And she obviously has the right to put input on those things, but she's going to listen to what I'm saying, and I know that I'm going to be heard. That's a big deal in terms of organizations and in terms of how they can grow and become better through working, again, with their employees and not over them. So, again, ideas do not always flow top down. And the ideas that do come from the top are sometimes, not always, disconnected from the reality of the situation in the room. So when I say that, I think especially about government, and I don't think that I meant do not always flow top down, but but most of the time ideas in corporations flow like you get a directive from the top. This is how we're going to do things, and we expect you to do it. But these ideas that are being sent down the pike have been meddled with and tinkered with by 37 other people. And by the time they get to us, they're so distorted from what needs to happen um, that you just lose track of the reality in the room. Now, that actually gives me an idea for the clip that I'm going to show you today. I'll show you Shoei versus Ford versus Ferrari. in a clip where they were trying to get the car into Le Mans, into the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and then Matt Damon's character, Carroll Shelby, he essentially says, I had to get ideas on your desk before they get muddied down because they don't know anything about cars. They don't know anything about speed. People that want to win. I had to get this to you like this. And he makes a big scene about it. And I'll try to find the scene and we'll watch it together. Again, I cannot reiterate enough how vitally important it is that organizations take the opinions of the people that are on the bottom and take that diversified opinion from me, from Dr. Claiborne, from Stephanie, from Miss White, from Miss Pena and Juliet, and from Dr. Cole, and from all of us, and we all of us together make, take all of our shared experiences and make something good for all of you in the classroom. And the same thing goes for you guys. If I'm doing something in my classroom that you guys are having trouble with, I want to know that. So when you fill out your end of the semester reports or your end of your semester evaluations, we really do look at those things and we take them to heart. We look at them to evaluate how we're doing with you to make your class better. And so that we can diversify ourselves and make our classes better, not just for you, but also for the ones that come after. I told you over and over again, you guys are setting a standard for what comes next. It's not just you. One of the examples in the book, the book goes through a lot of definitional things about like how organizations can be affected by certain things and the negative impact of those things. And you want to read those things. Like I'm expecting you to read the chapters here. Okay. Make sure that you're reading. But one thing in particular that it talks about is red tape. And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the origin of red tape comes from the Civil War. And I don't know if I'm drinking here or not. I don't think I did. That's too bad. I really want it right now. The red tape comes from the Civil War. Veterans would come to Washington looking for their veteran payouts and their payments. And their files at the White House or at the Veterans Affairs Office would actually be bound in literal red tape. So that's where that particular phrase comes from. Just an interesting story. Just something I thought you should know. So let's talk about Miles' Law while I'm getting a drink. Well, Sprite. I had a bunch of parties over Thanksgiving at my house, and people kept bringing Sprite. So I'm just like drowning in Sprite. I usually don't drink that stuff unless I'm sick. But it's actually not bad. So let's talk about Miles' Law. Now, Miles' Law states where you stand depends on where you sit. Very simply, a person's opinion on an organization is entirely formed by their position to the organization. What does this mean exactly? Well, this is pretty easy. You are either in a position of authority in the organization or you are a worker. Your attitude toward the organization also changes in this manner as well. So in bureaucratic terms, you always want your facility to be the one that gets the glory. If you're a supervisor, you want your department to get the big contract. You want your company to do it. And if you're inside of the company, if you're a worker, you want to be the one that leads the team that works on that contract. And then so on and so on and so on, going all the way down to, I was there. I was the one that worked on this particular thing. I did this. In a larger government sense, when we decide how to give contracts, when we decide how to give opportunity, we must balance the idea that while an organization may be saying that they can deliver the moon and the stars, I want to make sure that they can actually deliver the moon and that they're not doing what the old adage says, which is shooting for the moon and landing amongst the stars and that being okay. I want the moon. So understand that that's a potential barrier uh, to this particular thing. Now, groupthink. This is a phenomenon that occurs when there is a desire to maintain positive relationships within a working group. When I say groupthink, I am talking specifically about those people that are willing to go along to get along. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to cause friction. They don't want to. They don't want to get too political about it. They don't want to do too much. They don't want to go too far. They don't want to. In a group setting, they're the ones that just kind of sit back and let other people make the decisions. They can see that something's wrong, or they may disagree with something, but they're just not going to say anything because they don't want to. They don't want to disturb the water in any meaningful way. So groupthink, the sickness, and I'm going to call it a sickness because when you got a hive mind that isn't hiving, you got a problem. So groupthink by its very nature can impair the ability of a lower official from speaking out when they have a unique idea or disagree with the decision that was made. If, for example, somebody sees something and they know that this is a bad idea, you really shouldn't do this, and the adage is screw around and find out isn't available, this is going to hurt a lot of people. But I can't say anything because if I do, I might lose my position. And if I lose my position, I'm not part of this at all. This is where groupthink can come into play. Now, outside pressures, when I say outside pressures, I'm talking regulatory compliance from the government or politics. And remember, public sector versus private sector, this is a very different thing to each one. Public sector has to think a lot harder about how the politics of a certain thing affects them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're immune looking at Bud Light from politics, but remember, there's conflicting things here. Uh, yeah, I know. The news just popped up that the halting of federal funding is causing confusion in constitutional questions. No kidding. Again, another time. So outside pressure, like regulatory compliance or politics, can also hinder the ability of an organization to reach for diversified resources, which leads to negative decision making. When I say diversified resources, when I say reaching for diversified resources, I mean literally. The best example that I can come up with is one of the things that I wrote about when I wrote my master's thesis, which was disaster management and the idea that many localities, counties, case study after case study after case study from Louisiana and Katrina to Sandy in New Jersey to hurricanes in Oklahoma, not hurricanes, tornadoes in Oklahoma, and a particularly bad flooding situation in Floyd County. All of those things came down to a survival of the fittest mentality, meaning that in all of those situations, there were preventable deaths in nursing homes, in the elderly, and in rural communities because there was an assumption by the makers of the plans that people would just either be equipped to handle the disaster and there weren't enough resources put aside, or they didn't react quickly enough to growing problems inside of those communities because they just didn't know. So, like in Katrina, for example, nursing homes were left full of residents, understaffed, hospitals overflowing, understaffed. The Superdome in Louisiana full of people because they couldn't run the buses. Why could they not run the buses? If I remember this correctly, one, the mayor just didn't, and two, they couldn't find qualified drivers. They didn't have any qualified drivers. So one, it was too late. Two, they didn't have drivers. So you got flooded buses in an overcrowded area with elderly people dying in over 100+ degree nursing home attics because the power's out. Hospitals, ghastly stories from hospitals. Same thing in Oklahoma. Tornadoes come through places that are devastated. They only had one shelter in place. That was the local high school. The local high school was destroyed. What do you do now? Hurricane Sandy. Buses were running during Sandy, but they could not accommodate wheelchairs. So a man floated out of his wheelchair, waited until the water got to the level of his wheelchair, and then he floated up to the next level of the apartment building that he was in until somebody could take him inside. Up the last couple of steps and take him inside and take care of him. These things should never happen. And my solution to those problems was you need to be talking to disabled people. You need to talk to people that work in nursing homes. You need to talk to the hospitals. You need to talk to people outside of the first responders that you're talking to, because first responders have gotten into the mindset of, well, we've handled things like this before. We can handle anything. That's not true. You've handled it on much smaller scales. You need a larger section of emergency management to be called in, which is why I have a major problem with getting rid of FEMA. I know you guys had a discussion about getting things at the state level, and I wanted to start yelling, not because the idea is not a bad one to make the state required or make the state responsible for its own disaster management. But the problem becomes when you put that on the back of the states, the people that are in the states suddenly become the state. So one of the problems with the California wildfires right now is we're talking about how much disaster aid should go back to California. The pool that FEMA is pulling from is mostly funded by California. When you look at the major tax dollar amounts that go out of states, California is the one that funds most of that. And then the Speaker of the House was talking about, well, we need to have them do certain things like voter ID because we lost 3 of our congressional seats in California, frankly, through rigged elections in California. He didn't say that exactly, but that was what he said. That was the effect of what he said, was that essentially, when we win, it's legal. When we lose, it's stolen. And he's from Louisiana, which is in the red in terms of they take in more federal funding than they send out. And that man wants to put conditions on California's aid. I don't think so. If you're a state resident, you think you are. I don't think so. The federal government is supposed to serve as the larger body, that we are the United States of America, united. The problems in New York City are the same problems that we have in Georgia. The ones in California on the West Coast, and Washington and Oregon, and all of them being on fire. In Portland with Black Lives Matter. In the middle sections in Texas, when they had their power outages because they wanted to do power on their own and they did it badly. When Montana, which is still basically a West Coast state, when Montana is under snow, under a blanket of snow, when Idaho has trouble with their crops, when Iowa does whatever Iowa does, because I still hate Iowa from the 2010 Orange Bowl, it is our responsibility as a community of citizens. Because at the end of the day, we are all still American citizens, regardless of what nationality we started with, regardless of what language we speak, of where we're living in the United States. We are all still American citizens. That's supposed to be what sets us as different. And we've lost, and I hate to say it like this because it sounds so preachy, but we've lost that mentality. And I want to know where it went. So when we're talking about FEMA, when we're talking about disaster aid, we have to factor in that if you want the states to make those decisions, that's fine. But think about what happened with COVID when states were literally bidding against each other for ventilators, and then multiply that by the entire country. We're going to get rid of the federal taxes, and they're not going to tax my income anymore? There's going to be more money in my pocket. More money for what? For hurricane season? Because you're going to need it in hurricane season. When the insurance company raises rates on you again and there's no federal watchdog to make sure that they can't do that? Yeah, the money's going to go somewhere. It blows my mind the level of not understanding people have with these things. We'll keep going. They flattered him in his picture. Um, but actually, going back to what I just talked about, the reason that we have such a problem with FEMA right now is that we have been and sold a bill of goods about how ineffective FEMA has been, how ineffective FEMA has been for North Carolina, and how ineffective the federal government has been to actually responding to uh, the flooding in North Carolina. The $700 to rebuild thing, that lie, the social media websites mischaracterize what's going on in California with the wildfires, that they're being set by homeless people, that the water just needs to be flowing down from the peninsula in northwest California, which is just not true. Not true at a level that I don't think you guys understand how not true it is. Like Trump actually tweeted the other day that the United States military had gone into California and just turned the valves back on. And water, sweet water, the best water, the wettest water around, the wettest, coolest water, perfect, sweet water. They don't have this in China, just here in the United States, is now flowing. And you can now take a shower if you live in Los Angeles. The reality is the federal government did go back in there and turn on valves that had been shut down, but they had been shut down for 3 days due to maintenance. The reason that the water pressure was so low in Los Angeles for those fires was that they had tried a different, I don't remember exactly what the policy was, but they were trying something different and it didn't work. So there's plenty of water to go around in California. This is just a really big fire. One of the worst fires that California's ever seen in Los Angeles, in a heavily populated area. So the unprecedented scope of this fire has to be taken into account when you're actually talking about all of this. And it's just so dishonest. And when you got the social media executives, Elon and Twitter, I'm not calling it X, it's Twitter. Facebook, I'm not calling it Meta, it's Facebook. When you got Amazon that controls so many things in terms of like the postal service and in terms of the way that just general daily goods gets to people and the amount of things that they control from Amazon's perspective, and the way that they're an employer, I mean, it's just insane how much Amazon actually controls. When those are the guys that are at the inauguration, and those are the guys that, like, even TikTok, the CEO of TikTok is there, and they shut down the day before the bill is supposed to go into play, and they say, well, we're going to go dark now, and then they come back the next day after Trump says, we're not going to regulate that thing. So they essentially created a problem for themselves, gave Trump the credit for fixing it to kiss his ass, and then expect us to keep using it. And we will, because we're soft and uninformed and we don't know when we're being manipulated, but that's okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, I'll talk. All of these things together, the misinformation, the words of the president, the words of individuals, of the Facebook memes that we see, of the news articles that we consume, of the news that we watch. All of these things combine together to form a public trust. Now, one of two things can happen with this trust. Either we can offer constructive criticism through the right channels and they can try to adapt, or we can just outright attack them, fully understanding that I'm in Georgia. I have nothing to do with the California wildfires. You should not take what I say at face value. I've said this multiple times in my classes. Do not take what I say at face value. You have enough media literacy now, based on what I told you, what other people have told you, to go and find any resources that you want to either back up what I'm saying, and then you can challenge it and form your own opinion. You should always do this in my classes. When I say something that sounds personal and you want to challenge it, you should always challenge it. Always. I want you to do it. I encourage you to do it. You need to do it. So that if you are critiquing an organization, you have the right tools at hand to critique it in a meaningful way. Now, public perception to organizations is often a tactic used by politicians in support or opposition to government programs. If a politician likes it, we love it. It's great. It's a wonderful thing. If they don't, then they'll turn it into the worst thing since the Civil War or whatever, putting it in such obscure terms that you can't possibly decipher as a normal person. It's all political in that regard. But I know that this is a public administration class, this is not a government class, but you have to understand how much of administration just in the last 2 weeks has become political. I can't teach this class the same way. So criticism can come from a place where slow processes can be highlighted as wasteful or excessive, meaning that if an organization takes longer to fulfill a need, like if FEMA gives you $750 up front, but they're not going to give you any more money until they go through a check process to make sure that you live where you lived and that you need what you need. what you're asking for, that can be framed as illegitimate or as the government not taking you seriously. It's not true, but that's how it can be framed. Criticism can also come from a place where slow processes, or excessive, being that food stamps, for example, are considered excessive now because they don't pay for good foods or they pay for crap. I don't know what to tell you about that. Or social programs like student loan forgiveness, which has a demonstrated good effect on the economy, but some people didn't get it, so therefore it's bad. I don't know what to tell you. Things like that also exist. The effect of trust issues, essentially when constant bashing occurs, it can lead to negative outcomes and a stop to innovation. Continue, and when a company or an organization or a bureaucratic identity, or when the government itself is unwilling to try anything new, when we keep bouncing back and forth, like they keep saying that they recognize the government investigated Trump. Trump committed crimes, documented crimes. The Biden family didn't. And if they did, put up your evidence or shut up about it. Like these things don't happen in a vacuum. They don't happen just because somebody says so. So nerve-wracking that those things happen all the time. But they will literally stop trying to innovate. They will stop trying to be different. They will stop trying to be better or more progressive because that's controversial now. They'll just stop. And then the continued criticism of bureaucrats also impacts the public sector as the job market. Meaning less people, less qualified people, which does include you guys, by the way, after you get these degrees. Like you would be qualified to join the public sector. You would be able to go into an organization and actually make a difference on the world around you. But why would you when the pay is so bad and you're getting bashed like this all the time? Like I've been told so many times that as a college professor, I have a privileged view of the world, that I make too much money for what I do. I don't think they understand how much money I don't make. Like Dr. Parsons can tell you, I didn't make beans before this semester, and even now, I don't make beans. But I make more than what I did, and I love what I do. And I wouldn't trade this job for any private sector job in the world unless it's paid $100,000 or more, in which case, peace out. It was fun. But I'm kidding. I can't be bought. I'm not leaving you guys. I would never leave you guys. This is not how I'm built. So there are people like me that are still out there that are built to do public sector work. But we are becoming few and far between because it just doesn't make sense for us to continue doing this, getting bashed for it, and not seeing any fruits of the labor that we're trying to make. This phenomenon where the public sector in the public service is being dropped out leads to understaffing. You guys know firsthand what understaffing leads to. Probably even more than the book realizes. Understaffing affects you guys. Last two slides. Motivation and expertise. Now, we're going to go back and talk about the individual again. These organizations, these bureaucratic organizations, private sector organizations, all these places have the ability to hire Experts. Now, the hiring of experts allows for a couple of things. It allows you to be efficient and cost effective in goals, whatever those goals happen to be. The FDA has a goal, it has one goal: food and drug regulation. That's all it does. The EPA, their only goal is making sure that the environment is protected. And not just from climate change, but making sure that things like, the wildfires are taken care of, that climate change doesn't drown Miami. Very specific goals. My job, I'm a trained public administrator. I'm supposed to be able to walk into any HR office in the world and be able to do that job, at least somewhat. I can't, but I would at least be able to have a working knowledge of what's going on in that room and be able to handle it. Experts allow organizations to be better at what they do. It lets them be better. Now, experts can also cross disciplines. Some disciplines fit nicely into other disciplines. Dr. Parsons teaching my class, this Carla Kedman class, perfect. I've been jealous of her and Dr. Kolb for being able to have these first couple of classes with you. These are very interesting to me classes, but their disciplines in criminology and in sociology make them uniquely qualified to teach these things and teach them with a different perspective than I do. Dr. Parsons is light years better than me at teaching, and she's a little more strict on grading, as you're going to find out, probably. But my political background, coupled with Dr. Parsons' sociological and life experience, it's not a dig, help us approach the topic differently. So, she's found these chapters to be very dry. And to me, I found them to be very interesting. I'm very much motivated to do my work right now. Not that it always happens that way, but I'm very motivated to do my work right now. And motivation, which is the last thing that we're going to cover for the chapter, is such an important thing. Motivated employees are the strength of institutions, period. If you're sitting in a classroom right now and you're not motivated to be there, what are you doing? Why are you here? I know that we discussed this before about what our goals are and what and what why we're going to school, why we're doing this. Like, to me, I feel like you have a fundamental right to education. I don't care what you did. I don't care where you come from. I don't care how old you are, how ugly you are. Favors. I'm just kidding, Favors. I'm just kidding. I don't care about any of that stuff. I don't care about the background. I feel like everybody has a fundamental right to education. And if I can help you get that, I'm going to. A motivated workforce, you guys, if you guys get out and go into a discipline or a job, a career, whatever you do next, I want you to be motivated about it. I want you to do something that you love. I want you to do something that means something to you, that makes your heart go flutter a little bit, that gets you up in the morning, that gets you excited, that upsets you in the way that it upsets me when things happen to you. When I hear that people have been hurt, when I hear somebody's in segregation, when I hear somebody's potentially leaving, when I hear somebody's not taking the class seriously, I get upset. Dr. Parsons is saying it. She's gotten upset. Dr. Kolb has gotten upset. We've all felt it. I want you guys to go find that thing that makes you feel the same way. Motivated workforces almost always provide consistent, high quality results. If you've got a motivated workforce, and this is part of leadership as well, if your workforce is motivated, the outputs that you will get from those people are almost always better than those that are not. Motivated employees also experience more happiness outside of work, which leads to better mental health and better overall community outcomes. And nobody's going to argue with a better community outcome. Motivated employees don't come out of nowhere. Nobody likes to go to work, but you can love the work that you're doing when you're working with somebody that you actually appreciate working for. I've been blowing up Tiffany this entire lecture, but I'm serious. Motivated employees, me, are usually created by positive bosses, Tiffany and Abby, in upbeat work environments. Now, prison is arguably not an upbeat work environment. It's arguably not an upbeat work environment at all. But we can make it that way. We can choose to make this a better place to work in. And I'm going to send along your reflection for this class. Dr. Parsons will go through it with you. I'm going to go through it with her. She should be able to piece out what it is. It's a SWOT analysis. And I meant to go through it in the lecture. I don't know how I missed it. I must have missed it in the chapter somehow when I was doing the PowerPoint. But a SWOT analysis is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Think of it like a 4x4 matrix. Top left strengths, top right weaknesses, bottom left opportunities, bottom right threats. You're going to go through yourself individually. You're going to list your strengths. You're going to list your weaknesses. You're going to list your opportunities. Opportunities being, what do I have right now that is going to get me to where I want to go? Is it the education that I'm gaining? Is it something like a motivational leadership that I have? Am I a motivator? Be honest with yourself when you're answering this. And then threats. Be honest with this too. What is in my way? What do I need to be aware of in myself, inside of myself, that could derail me from this? Is it anger? Do I have a short fuse? Is it the lifestyle? Is it something that I'm doing? Something that I can change? Be honest with yourself and follow my instructions on that SWOT analysis. I'm going to try to get you a video to go along with this lecture as well. It should be about individual SWOT analysis, so it should go along with this. And I will see you guys on Monday. I'm really looking forward to seeing you. Stay safe, stay healthy. I've really missed you guys. Thank you, Dr. Parsons, for me in front of everybody. Thank you so much for helping me cover this class. Until now, hopefully I'll be back on my wheels consistently by the middle of next week. Fingers crossed. Big hopes. I'll see you guys soon through Dr. Cole's class on genocide. See you soon.